Welcome back to AI Quantum Secure. This is your AI Quantum Architect, and this is our 10th video in this series. The foundation is laid. Now we secure the structure. In this session, we're analyzing the bridge between physical reality and mathematical certainty. Look at the blueprint before you. We've moved through the quantum source and navigated the quantum channel, where we successfully detected an adversary's presence and accounted for the interception attempt. But a link established is not yet a link secured. Even after Jennifer, our receiver, processes the photons through the polarization analyzer and completes the error correction phase, the raw key material remains vulnerable to residual information held by Chris. Today, we focus on the Privacy Amplification Engine. This is the final structural filter where we apply universal hashing to distill our noisy, partially leaked raw key into a final information-theoretic secure key. We're moving from the uncertainty of physical photons to the absolute mathematical certainty of the final crypto registry. Let's break down the logic of the final filter. Before we can apply our final filters, we must perform a foundation inspection. In this phase, we examine the raw key, the initial bit stream established between John and Jennifer. As practitioners, we do not operate on optimism. We operate on cold reality. That reality is currently displayed on your screen. Status: compromised. While a QKD link may be established, it is not yet secure. Notice the red anomalies within the binary stream. These represent areas where our entropy has been diluted. We must assume from the outset that the raw key is tainted. Through our diagnostic telemetry, we've identified that the adversary, Chris, already possesses partial knowledge of this string. This isn't due to a failure in the protocol, but rather the unavoidable physical and classical leakage points. Specifically, we are tracking detector efficiency mismatches, hardware imperfections that Chris can exploit, and the unavoidable data leakage that occurs during classical error reconciliation, a phase we colloquially call the whispering. Our current leakage coefficient has exceeded the safe threshold of 2.5%. If we were to use this key material in its current state, our entire security architecture would be fundamentally flawed. We have the raw materials, but they are unrefined. In the next step, we will move this compromised material into the Privacy Amplification Engine to distill it into something Chris can no longer track. This is where the theory of the perfect channel meets the reality of the threat landscape. As practitioners, we don't just hope for a clean signal. We monitor for the specific signatures of Chris. On your screen, you can see the frequency analysis of a live session between John and Jennifer. The red spikes represent a signal match for data leakage, a clear indication of an interception attempt. Our system has flagged this as status compromised. But in the world of AI quantum security, a compromise doesn't mean we stop. It means we adjust our entropy budget. We have identified two primary sources of leakage. First, detector efficiency mismatch. Chris is exploiting the physical hardware's inability to be perfectly uniform. Second, and more subtle, is the information leaked during classical error reconciliation, what we call the whispering. Even though this happens on a public channel, every parity bit shared is a bit that Chris can use to reconstruct the key. Look at the warning at the base of the blueprint. If we build on this foundation now, the architecture collapses. If John and Jennifer were to use this raw key material without the next step, their encryption would be a house of cards. We must now move to the Privacy Amplification Engine to mathematically compress this tainted data until Chris's knowledge is reduced to zero. Let's look at the hashing protocols that perform this final purification.
We have identified the leakage. Now we deploy the refinement machinery. In classical architecture, practitioners often rely on standard cryptographic hashes like SHA-256. However, as quantum architects, we recognize its structural limitations. SHA-256 targets collision resistance. It is an integrity tool, not a secrecy tool. For the level of certainty we require, it offers no secrecy guarantee against a quantum-capable adversary. Instead, we utilize universal hash families. Look at the schematic of the refinement press on your screen. This is where we transition from computational security to information-theoretic security. The raw tainted data enters the press, where the universal hash function applies a specific mathematical compression. Notice the red fragments being ejected. Those are the correlations and leakage points previously held by Chris. We aren't merely obfuscating or hiding this information. As the objective statement below the press clarifies, we are mathematically deleting it. The output is a refined, high-entropy bit stream that provides absolute secrecy. By the time the data leaves this machinery, the adversary's distinguishing advantage is reduced to a mathematically negligible parameter. We have successfully converted physical vulnerabilities into mathematical certainty. Now that the refinement is complete, let's finalize our crypto key registry. With the leakage identified and our universal hash family selected, we enter the core of the refinement process, the compression engine. Our objective here is absolute, washing away the correlations Chris is tracking. Look at the input currently feeding into the engine. We are starting with a long, partially compromised string of 1024 bits. Because of the adversarial activity we detected, the noise ratio is critically high at 42%. Using this string in its raw form would be a fundamental architectural failure. As the data enters the funnel, it undergoes high-pressure compression. We are applying a mathematical pressure of 10 to the 6th GPa to force entropy refinement. Notice the system alert, correlation detection, purging. This is the engine actively stripping away the patterned vulnerabilities Chris relies on for prediction. The transformation is radical. What was once a scattered, vulnerable stream emerges as a shorter, dense, high-entropy key of 128 bits. We have achieved maximum entropy with zero correlation. By shrinking the key, we haven't lost security. We have concentrated it. We have successfully converted 1,000 bits of maybe into a 128 bits of absolute. The foundation is secured, and the structure is complete. We have successfully navigated the entire architectural pipeline. We began with physical photons at the quantum source, transited a quantum channel monitored for adversarial presence, and utilized Jennifer's quantum receiver to sift and correct the incoming stream. By passing our raw key material through the Privacy Amplification Engine, we have achieved the goal of every quantum architect: mathematical certainty. Look at the crypto key registry on your screen. This hexadecimal string is the result of a 10-to-1 compression ratio, processed from a high-density entropy pool. It is no longer a collection of noisy physical measurements. It is a purified 256-bit final hash length. Our system status is now green. QKD link established. Privacy amplification complete. This key provides the information-theoretic security required to protect our most sensitive data against any adversary, current or future. The architecture holds. Thank you for joining this deep dive at AI Quantum Secure. Continue to build with precision. Welcome to the reality check. In the world of quantum architecture, we don't operate on theoretical maximums. We operate on what remains after the CRIS tax. Look at your session data telemetry. John and Jennifer began with a raw foundation of 2,000 bits. However, the physical reality of our quantum channel introduced a QBER of 5.2%. This isn't just noise, it's a direct indicator of potential adversarial presence. We immediately write off 240 bits to account for this leakage. Next, we must account for the overhead of the classical world. During the reconciliation phase, an additional 110 bits were surrendered to error correction costs. The final and most critical structural adjustment is the finite-size safety margin. We are subtracting 50 bits to protect against statistical fluctuations that occur in real-world finite-length keys. The result is a net min-entropy of 1,600 bits. This is your true budget. This 1,600-bit pillar represents the only portion of the session that is perfectly mathematically secret. As an architect, this is the only number that matters for the next phase of construction. To conclude this session, we must address the safety buffer, the final structural margin that separates a secure architecture from a theoretical failure. Look at the waterfall chart on your screen. John and Jennifer started with an impressive 2,000 initial raw bits. However, as we've learned, we cannot spend entropy we don't actually have. We immediately subtract 240 bits for the 5.2% cube EBR leakage detected in the channel, followed by 110 bits for the unavoidable error correction cost. But here is where many practitioners stumble. Notice the magnifying glass centered on the finite-size safety margin. In the lab, we often work with infinite data models, but in the field, we operate with finite signals. We apply a final 50-bit penalty to account for statistical fluctuations. This leaves us with a high-integrity 1,600-bit entropy pool. As the warning at the base of your display states, ignore this and the math fails. As an architect, your duty is to ensure that even in the worst-case statistical scenario, the integrity of the key remains absolute. We have successfully moved from 2,000 tainted bits to 1,600 bits of pure mathematical certainty. The foundation is solid. The structure is secure.
We conclude this module with a final audit of the most dangerous vulnerability in any QKD architecture, the optimistic architect trap. Look at the comparison on your screen. On the left, we have the reality, a secure min-entropy of 1,600 bits. This is the hard limit of what we can safely spend after accounting for CRIS's interception and statistical fluctuations. Now, look to the right. This is the failure mode. In this scenario, the architect overestimates the system's health, believing they have 1,800 secure bits. By failing to apply the necessary compression, they generate a key that is 200 bits longer than the math allows. To the untrained eye, this 1,800-bit key looks random, but as practitioners, we know better. This optimistic parameter estimation leads to a key that retains structure. It leaves a mathematical door unlocked for CRIS, turning what should be an unbreakable link into a critical system vulnerability. The lesson is absolute. You can only spend the entropy you actually have. If your estimation is too optimistic, the Privacy Amplification Engine cannot do its job, and the entire security architecture collapses. Build with honesty. Respect the entropy budget. System status, QKD link established. Privacy amplification complete. We analyze this technical deep dive with a stark visualization of the collapse scenario. As practitioners, we must realize that an adversary like CRIS does not need to break every bit to compromise your architecture. If the previous step, the privacy amplification, is based on flawed assumptions, the result is a catastrophic failure that bypasses standard diagnostics. On your screen,
you see the result of a mostly random key. While the resulting key may pass standard statistical randomness tests, it still contains 200 bits of hidden structure. To the unrefined eye, the shield looks solid. To the quantum architect, the cracks are evident. Those 200 bits are not just a margin of error. They are a direct roadmap for Chris to decrypt your most sensitive data. Let this be your final project requirement. Assumptions are the enemy of security. A mostly random key is not a secure key. It is a broken key. In the quantum realm, there is no middle ground between absolute mathematical certainty and total structural collapse. Build without assumptions. Secure the future. Moving forward, this architectural module by defining our ultimate objective, the gold standard. As practitioners, we must distinguish between two fundamentally different security paradigms. On the left, you see computational security. This is the classical standard. It relies on the assumption that an adversary, like Chris, has limited time and computing power. It is a lock that is simply hard to break, designed to withstand a 1,000-year assault. But in a quantum future, hard is a variable that eventually reaches zero. On the right is our objective, Information-Theoretic Security. Look at the void graphic. This is the mathematical event horizon we achieve through rigorous privacy amplification. Here, the solvability is zero. This isn't about making the lock stronger, it's about making the key indistinguishable from the background noise of the universe. Even with infinite computing power, even with a perfect quantum computer, the key remains fundamentally unbreakable because the information Chris needs simply does not exist in the final bit stream. We have moved beyond the 1,000-year timer and into the realm of absolute mathematical permanence. The foundation is laid. The structure is secure. This is the AI Quantum Secure Standard. Thank you for your attention. End of briefing.
We have reached the final checkpoint of this architectural deep dive. As we have seen throughout this session, the transition from physical photons to mathematical certainty is not an automatic process. It is a rigorous, calculated discipline. Our mission as architects is to move beyond the fragile assumptions of classical cryptography and master the laws of quantum mechanics to protect the data of tomorrow. Remember the primary lesson of the Privacy Amplification Engine. Your security is only as strong as your most conservative estimate. On your screen is the architect's mandate. Ensure your entropy budget is never in the red. If you overdraw on your entropy, you leave a structural opening that an adversary like Chris will inevitably exploit. To build the future, you must respect the math of the present. The Onium link is established. The foundation is laid. Now go and secure the structure. Thank you for joining us at AI Quantum Secure. Subscribe for the next architectural deep dive, where we will continue to turn quantum complexity into strategic security.